But so if I go like this, mm,
Farage praised Elon Musk a few days ago as an absolute hero figure, very helpful to our cause. Given that this is a man who has described a UK government minister entirely wrongly, many would say outrageously, and even dangerously, as being a rape genocide apologist, and who has praised Tommy Robinson as being a political prisoner, would Nigel Farage and yourself, would you reappraise those comments now?
Look, Mr. Musk is an advocate of free speech. That's why he owns the X platform. He's one of the most successful entrepreneurs in this
Even
country.
when he makes gratuitous comments.
He's got every right to be involved in politics in this country because he employs thousands of people here, paying hundreds of millions of tax, and he recognises that it's only Reform UK, frankly, that can make Britain grow again. So, my position with regard to Mr. Yaxley Lennon, I've stated on numerous occasions, as has Nigel, he's a convicted criminal, he's in jail, he's nothing to do with us and never will be. It is as clear and as simple as that. We're a serious political party looking to win the next general election and to run this country with root and branch reform to get things properly organised and properly governed again.
Would you say that Mr. Yaxley Lennon is a dangerous individual?
I don't know the individual. I don't know him. I've never met him. I've never spoken to him.
In terms of his impact on British politics?
I've no idea. All I know is that he's been in jail a number of times for a number of issues, and he's currently in jail. And I don't think any more needs to be said. And frankly, do you know what I think people really want to talk about? That is, how can we have had, for 2 decades, a huge cover-up of this child rape gang scandal?
Why do you say there's a cover-up? There have been numerous inquiries into it, which have made multiple recommendations.
No, come on, Lewis, seriously, are you telling me that things have not been covered up by care workers, by police officers?
Indeed so. We know that, and
you are living in.
And Mr. Tice, we know that because there have been inquiries that have looked into it and reported on it. But there hasn't been a cover-up because there have been government inquiries into it. It is a trope to suggest that there's been a national cover-up.
And some of those inquiries confirmed that people knew about things and turned a blind eye.
So we know that. Mr. Musk hasn't told us about that. We knew that already.
But what we haven't got, we don't know how many towns, how many dozens and dozens of towns have thousands of white young children being raped, being violated, or maybe you don't care about that. Maybe because they're.
What's your basis?
You seem quite relaxed about
it. What's your evidence?
I think what we need is a national inquiry to get to the bottom of what's gone on. Who knew what when amongst care workers, council workers, local councillors, police officers, and why did people turn a blind eye? What were they afraid
of? How many people do you think? I mean, you talk about thousands. What's your evidence, or how do you know when you're talking about thousands? How many towns? How many? Why do you say that? How are you so assured that so much of this has taken place?
Because lots of journalists are reporting this in lots of different broadcast organisations and in the media now, because people finally, eventually, are getting stuck into the issue. You seem rather complacent and relaxed.
No, not at all, Mr. Tice.
Thousands of young white children.
I'm just wondering.
Raped and violated.
I'm just wondering why it is. You seem to be suggesting there has been a mass national cover-up. But we know that there was indeed elements of cover-up at a local level, and we know that.
So you just admitted what you didn't admit earlier, which was the word cover-ups. No. I want to know how many cover-ups. I want to know how many towns. I want to know how many people.
Mr. Tice, what I'm saying is we know that that's been the case because, for example, Mr. Tice, no, that's not true, and you can try and dissemble if you like, but I'm just going to tell you calmly exactly what I said, and I'm going to say that we know that has taken place at a local level because we have had, for example, the final report of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse chaired by Professor Alexis Jay. You are suggesting that there has been some national cover-up, whereas on the contrary, we know that there were a series of, to greater or lesser extent, local cover-ups, or certainly the. But we know that because there has been already a national inquiry into it. So why do we need another? Is my question to you.
Because we don't know how many towns, we don't know who knew what, when, and why. And we therefore need to know if it was deliberate by people in order to secure possibly for political ends, then then those questions need to be asked and answered. And that inquiry that you're referring to from 2022
And we also
did
know,
cover a lot of that, and a lot of the recommendations have not yet been implemented.
and we also
it
know,
seems to me that there is still from what you're indicating, an unwillingness to get to the bottom of possibly the greatest scandal in this country in recent decades. And I tell you what, I'd rather know a bit more than a bit less.
we also know, and I'm just going on what has been said in the public domain already. So that, for example, the Home Office report in 2020 said it is likely that no one community or culture is uniquely predisposed to offending in this regard. Would you agree with that?
Look, I think I want to know everything that has gone on, and I think that's what
I'm just asking you, do you think it is, as that Home Office report said, it is likely that no one community or culture is uniquely predisposed to offending with regards to...
Not uniquely, but we do know in this situation that it was primarily men of Pakistani heritage, whether born in the UK or born elsewhere, who have been,
and have been white grooming gangs as well,
all these child rape gangs. We do know that because, and we have to understand who knew what when. That's what we have. And what we haven't got is a comprehensive inquiry across the whole piece.
And we know...
And the national inquiry that you referred to didn't cover all of the various bases. And we've got to explore it and understand it and expose it fully.
Sure, of course. But we also know that there have been plenty of examples of white grooming gangs as well, which catch far less attention. Isn't that right?
Frankly, I'm not aware of that. No, I don't.
For example, the 2010.
I think what you're doing is you're dissembling and trying to cover up the greatest child rape scandal.
You're saying that I'm trying to cover up a child rape scandal myself. You don't think that might be a touch hyperbolic, Mr. Tice?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you seem rather keen to sort of dilute and dissemble here, as opposed to
I'm not. I'm just trying to get to the evidence base. You're saying, without much evidence, as far as I can tell, that there has been this enormous phenomenon in all of these places, and I'm saying to you that while there has clearly been pockets of appalling criminality, that the suggestion that this is a problem which is uniquely disposed to one community or one culture is incorrect, according to the Home Office report. So, for example, you haven't heard of a white grooming gang. Well, let me tell you about one. The 2010 convictions of a group of white men and a woman for abusing 30 children in the Camborne area of Cornwall received far less attention than any of these other matters, hasn't it? I mean, shouldn't we be thinking about child sexual abuse in the round?
Exactly, which is why you need a national inquiry. And you seem rather confused in this interview, because at one moment you're saying there were cover-ups, then you're inferring that there were.
No, I didn't. Just made that up, but that's all right.
What we need is a full-blown national inquiry to expose the whole lot. Because the truth is, you don't know, and I don't know.
The Labour lot over there are banging on about playing politics with this important issue. But the last time I attended a debate on child rape gangs, there was just one Labour backbencher turned up. They should hang their heads in shame. But will the Home Secretary agree with me that we need a specific inquiry into why young British white girls are being systematically raped by men of Pakistani heritage?
Secretary, we need to make sure that young people, that children are being protected. These are vile crimes against children, and across the country we have seen young girls, we have seen teenagers, and we have seen young boys who have been exploited in the most cruel and horrendous way by perpetrators. We have seen the abuse by Pakistani heritage gangs, paedophile gangs operating online. We have seen abuse in communities and institutions and in family homes. All of those crimes are truly horrendous. It's why after the Rotherham inquiry in 2014, when we saw the appalling abuse, including by a Pakistani heritage gang in that case, I called for the duty to report. I called for the law to be changed so that it was a responsibility on public servants to report child abuse, and that it would be an offence to cover up child abuse. The government that he was part of for many years failed to bring that duty to report in. They failed to do so, and we have lost a decade. We have to change the law. We have to make sure that we go after abuse without fear or favour wherever it is found, in order to get justice for victims, protection for victims, and make sure that dangerous perpetrators end up behind bars.
Rape gangs and the grooming of children has haunted Keighley and the wider Bradford district for decades, yet local leaders have consistently refused to launch an inquiry. The National Independent ICSA report the Home Secretary is treating as a silver bullet wasn't an inquiry into rape gangs, and nor does it reference Keighley or Bradford once, despite many, including myself, fearing that the scale of this issue across the Bradford district will dwarf that of Rotherham. So if the Home Secretary believes that the ICSA report gives us all the information we need to tackle this vile and disgusting crime, can she tell me how many children across the Bradford district have been abused through child sexual exploitation? Who are the perpetrators? And when will my constituents expect to see them behind bars or deported?
Madam Deputy Speaker, there are appalling crimes that have taken place against children in Bradford, in Keighley, and across the country. Truly appalling crimes. And we also have to, all of us, face up to the fact that child sexual abuse and exploitation continues. This is not just about historic crimes, this is about continuing crimes and abuse for hundreds of thousands of children across the country. And that is why it is so important, first of all, that we take forward the reforms that have been proposed, that we make sure we have the way to keep victims and survivors' voices at the very heart of this. But some of it has got to be about how we change the way that policing and councils work together, implementing changes and reforms, including on the duty to report. And what we are also doing, because he obviously raises particular local concerns, what we'll also be doing is working with Tom Crowther and with the Victims and Survivors panel on how best local areas can best involve survivors and victims in what has happened in their area, to make sure that victims and survivors are properly listened to, that they can get to the truth, and also that fundamental changes take place for the future.
Paul Wall. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the last few days, my town's name, my hometown's name, Rochdale, has been exploited by some people who treat child rape as a political game rather than as an appalling crime that should be dealt with. The horrific abuse of children by grooming gangs, many of them predominantly Pakistani heritage grooming gangs, was compounded by failures by my local council and by the local police. All Rochdalians, whatever their background, want to see sex offenders prosecuted swiftly and punished harshly. So can I welcome the Home Secretary's statement today, and can I ask her to leave no stone unturned in implementing all the recommendations of the J report, something the opposition signally failed to do?
Home Secretary. Well, my right honourable friend is right to recognise the seriousness of these crimes. Obviously the experiences in Rochdale, including not just the issues around gang networks and the Pakistani heritage gang networks that he talks about, but also some of the experiences in care homes that took place as well, some of the other issues that have been investigated over the years, and the terrible experiences of victims and survivors and their families as a result. But he's also right to say that what we actually need is change. And that has to be about how we work with victims and survivors on taking forward new reforms and changes, but also how we're going to have to go further in a series of areas, because the thing about child abuse and exploitation is that perpetrators change this all the time, and they look for new ways to abuse children, and that is what we have to keep tackling.
Nick Timothy. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the most shocking details of the rape gangs is the evidence of collusion and corruption among police officers, social workers and local councillors. Will the Home Secretary commit today to establishing a unit in the NCA dedicated to investigating not only the untried perpetrators, but the police officers, social workers and local councillors complicit of these disgusting crimes?
Home Secretary. Well, the honourable member makes an important point, which is that alongside the issues around pursuing the perpetrators, which always has to be the greatest priority, because that is about protecting victims and making sure those who commit vile crimes face justice. There also has to be a responsibility on people for their own public roles, whether that be in policing, in local councils, but also in other institutions, as we've seen issues around the Church of England, issues around the Catholic Church and other institutions that were investigated as part of the inquiry. But one of the reasons that we are so keen to change the law, and indeed it's something that I raised back when he was working in the Home Office, was the importance of changing the law on the duty to report, is that is what then makes it an offence if you have public officials who are covering up or who are failing to report. And that's why it's so important that we do that, so we can have proper accountability as well.
Invest, save.
Has child safeguarding measures in it, and that was sickening. The Tories said phooey, or words to that, words of a similar meaning, and said that actually the whole bill, as far as they were concerned, was pretty much a disgrace, because it was rowing back bits of the bill on the academies programme that the Tories pushed after Tony Blair had brought it in. We got a flavour of that fundamental argument about the national inquiry in Prime Minister's questions, and here's a flavour of those exchanges.
The Prime Minister called for 9 inquiries in the last Parliament. Does he not see that by resisting this one, people will start to worry about a cover-up?
Mr. Speaker, this is an important issue, and we have to focus on the victims and survivors. And it isn't helpful. This sort of lies and misinformation and slinging of mud doesn't help them one bit. It doesn't help one bit. We already know what the major flaws are. And my argument is we should get on with that action.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has effectively told us that he's not able to do 2 things at the same time. This issue of a delay is a weak excuse. This is one of the worst scandals in British history, Mr. Speaker. How are they going to explain to their constituents that obeying his whip is more important than doing the right thing?
She's right to say it's one of the worst scandals. It's terrible. That's why I acted on it. Her recently acquired view that it's a scandal, having spent a lot of time on social media over Christmas, not once in 8 years did she stand here and say what she's just said. Not once in 8 years.
You don't have to be a lip reader to see that Kemi Badenoch was saying absolute rubbish repeatedly then when Keir Starmer was speaking. There was a change of tone in what Keir Starmer was saying today. On Monday, when he was answering questions at his beginning of the year launch, which was meant to be talking about the NHS, but this issue of grooming gangs seems to have dominated this first week back for Parliament. There, at that launch, he was saying that Kemi Badenoch, by calling for an inquiry, was on a far-right bandwagon. Today, he said people are allowed to call for an inquiry. It's both a legitimate thing to call for an inquiry. He wanted to make sure he was showing respect to people, particularly victims and victims groups who might be calling for an inquiry, but he wanted to separate Kemi Badenoch from them and say, actually, she was up to a different game.
One evening in 2006, a 12-year-old girl went into this police station. She reported that she had been molested in a local graveyard. The police officers here told her to sober up and come back later. As she left, she was accosted by 2 further men who took her away in a car and raped her. They gave her money for a bus fare and dropped her in the streets in this town in Greater Manchester. She was picked up by another man. He also raped her. He then abandoned Sam again in another street in this town, and another man picked her up, Shakil Chowdhury. He also raped her. It was an appalling ordeal. Now, she eventually did receive some action from the police some days later. She reported her incident to the St. Mary's Rape Crisis Centre. But what we can reveal today is that one of the first actions the police took was to try and force a contraceptive pill into her mouth. I've known Sam for many years, and yesterday I spoke with her about this traumatizing ordeal.
After you were abused by a gang, so many members on one day, what happened to you when you sought support from the police?
The police did a referral to St Mary's Rape Crisis Centre, who after a couple of days finally managed to fit me in. From there they did examinations, took photographs of all the bruising and trauma that I had received. And from that I received the emergency contraceptive pill. At the time when I was at the appointment, I didn't feel comfortable taking it, so I did request to take it home and just have some time to take it all in. It wasn't that I was not going to take it, it was just I needed to come to the conclusion and acceptance myself.
Then you got home, but there was an incident with a police officer about that pill quite soon after.
Yeah, I put the pill in my room and then I went out. The following day when I came home from being with friends, there was an officer sat in my mum's living room and my parents were in the kitchen, and he was quite vocally aggressive, telling me how important it was to take it. He had already gone through my room and found it and produced it in the living room to me. He popped it out the box and tried and passed it to me to take. I refused and said, I'm not ready, and walked off to go upstairs. He followed me into the hallway and he grabbed my arm and then grabbed my face and pushed it into my mouth to swallow and said, it's for your own good.
Why?
Hey guys, so I just wanted to come in here and talk to you guys
This
about
thing is out of control. My gosh.
It's life insurance. I don't need life insurance. I'm healthy.
Welcome to the show. It's fair to say it's all kicking off. Since the Labour Party yesterday denied there'll be the opportunity for a full national inquiry into the scandal that gripped Oldham. Elon Musk has got involved. Nigel Farage has got involved. Kemi Badenoch has got involved. Everybody is saying this simply isn't good enough. Well, today I'll be joined by a council whistleblower who said that when he tried to raise red flags, it was he who found himself on the receiving end of an investigation. And later in the show, I'll be joined by an inspiring single mum from Cornwall, never been involved in politics in her life, so moved by what's going on, so outraged by the political ineptitude to deal with it. She wants to organise a 1 million women march to London. And hey, let's get a few blokes along while we're at it to show the country we've simply had enough of the politicians, of the councillors, of the media, of the entire establishment burying its head in the sand about this issue, which is Britain's shame. Get in touch, gnews.com.
The problem with Robinson being the hero of this is that Robinson is not in prison for anything to do with the gang rape scandal.
The primary source of information for me in Canada has been Tommy Robinson, and his insistence on pursuing this. It might be wonderful for us to presume that the person who does that would also be of unimpeachable ethical character on all dimensions simultaneously.
Jordan's responsible for this mess that's going on now. He should be ashamed of himself, because in the UK, we know who Tommy Robinson is. In the US, he has been Tommy Robinson's passport to gaining influence with Elon Musk.
If you want to have the uncomfortable conversation about Islam, it is sort of conducive to pedophilia.
I don't know what planet you're living on or what you're smoking, but I'd suggest that you do a course in religious studies.
Thank you for the ad hominem attacks. I'm sure that means you have a really strong argument, but I think the young working class girls would beg to differ.
In recent years, we've spoken to alleged victims of grooming across the country. In 2020, this woman in Yorkshire told us how her abuse had continued from childhood into adulthood.
They raped me first, and then they said to me, stop speaking to the police, don't speak to the police, why are you doing that?
In Hull, our investigation into several victims of a predominantly Asian grooming gang led to Humberside Police reopening the investigation.
That room, that flat, took my childhood from me. I think I was raped by around 150 men over the 3-year period.
In Glasgow, we met victim Tony Louise, who says she was abused from the age of 12.
When I went to the police, one of the police officers turned out to me and went, "You've got a very active imagination for a wee girl, haven't you?"
In more than a dozen regions where we explored the problem, a common theme was inaction and a failure to prosecute. Marlon, who we first interviewed 2 years ago when his daughter Scarlett was still going missing, says he was dissatisfied today with the Prime Minister's response.
I found it as an opportunity for him to have a go at other political parties. I don't care about other political parties. What I care about is children being groomed. Obviously, I've gone through that with my daughter, but this is continuing.
There have been successful prosecutions, such as this gang in Rochdale, and local public inquiries into grooming gangs in Telford, Rotherham, and Greater Manchester.
The lessons from our past have been well and truly learned.
There was a national review into child abuse under Alexis Jay, but its section on grooming gangs was limited to 6 locations, mostly not known for having a problem. And Jay expressed frustration her recommendations hadn't been implemented. Today, the Home Secretary said that would change.
First, I can confirm we will make it mandatory to report abuse. Second, we'll also legislate to make grooming an aggravating factor in the sentencing of child sexual offences, because the punishment must fit the terrible crime.
The opposition echoed Elon Musk's call for a national inquiry.
Will the Home Secretary commission that national statutory public inquiry which can compel witnesses to attend, that can requisition evidence, and where it can take evidence under oath?
The government says it's focused on improving police inquiries, and lawyer David Greenwood says they still aren't properly recording information about offenders.
I'm not convinced that the police forces and local authorities have gathered the necessary data. So I just don't think the data is there. Police should be working out who these groups are more actively and identifying them and using their powers to disrupt them.
Marlon, here with daughter Scarlett, is also calling for a national public inquiry. Arguably, there is more to learn, but it's also the case that there's plenty still to action.
Maggie Oliver's here, former Detective Constable, Greater Manchester Police, of course, a woman who knows probably more about this terrible scandal than anybody else, a woman who was actually quoted in the last J report, although what she wrote was curtailed by 2/3. She's a woman who's been constantly attacked for some of the things that she said, and she's now here to talk to us about how dreadful the situation is right now. Maggie, very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks so much for joining us. I know you've been very busy in the last few days, and since this story has been resurrected by Elon Musk, which I think has been a great service to not just to the UK, but to the victims and to the world really as well, because I think only sometimes when other people from other countries look upon what we've done, can we really realise how ashamed we should be of it.
Yeah, I have to agree, Mike. You know, Elon Musk entering into the fray has brought a spotlight, an international spotlight onto this, which has, well, actually, even the statement last night from Yvette Cooper, you know, announcing the implementation of all these recommendations, which have sat on a shelf for 2-3 years, that in itself is a little bit of progress. They should have been implemented straight after the J inquiry. I've been quite outspoken about my criticisms of the grooming gang section of that inquiry. It was painfully inadequate. I would even say it was a whitewash.
Yes.
It was less than 2 weeks. All senior police officers and social workers and council bosses were allowed to give evidence. One victim, half a day. Myself and all the other non-institutional witnesses were forbidden from speaking, statements decimated, we were all silenced. So none of the towns and cities, you know, Huddersfield, Rochdale, Rotherham, Oxford, Telford, not one of them included. So I would say that public inquiry was a missed opportunity in the way that so many other things have been, Mike. And so I welcome the spotlight back on it. I'm trying to stay out of the politics of it because this topic has been my life for 20 years and I know it inside out, and there's many layers and threads running through it.
is that men will behave like animals, either individually or in groups, and attack women. When you talk to the imams and you say, you know, men should be taught to control their sexual urges, the imam will say, actually, it's women who should stay out of sight. It's women who should cover themselves up.
I want to start by talking about the grooming gangs crisis, rape gangs epidemic. Is this specifically an Islamic problem? Because many people have said that this isn't to do with people's religion or even ethnicity.
It has to do with people's ethnicity and with people's religion. And that's the core of the problem. So instead of protecting these victims, vulnerable girls, some of them as young as 9 years old, we fret about what to label it, what to call the problem. In the case of the UK, that many of them are of Pakistani origin and some of them Bangladeshi, but there are also other ethnic groups. In the case of the Netherlands, I lived in the Netherlands in the late 1990s. What you call grooming gangs in the UK, in the Netherlands, they were called lover boys. And it was young Muslim men, mostly of Moroccan origin, who did the exact same thing, who went and struck up relationships with young girls in very poor neighborhoods, white working class neighborhoods, and then gave them the impression that they were boyfriend and girlfriend, and then gave them presents, giving the impression to the young girl that her boyfriend cared so much and was seeking a life of commitment, and then found themselves pimped in the red light districts in Amsterdam and other areas where young women are sold into prostitution. When you look at the stories in Sweden and Germany, what you see are these gangs, many of them related to one another, blood relations of one another, preying on young women. I saw the phenomenon. I saw also sexual assaults perpetrated by groups of young Muslim men, mostly young Muslim men, but there are others. There are also non-Muslims. For instance, there were men from the former Yugoslavia, Serbians. Some of them come from some African countries that are not necessarily Muslim, but they are immigrants. They are doing this either in groups, and it is an organized system, such as the grooming gangs, or it's spontaneous, what looks like a spontaneous, cohorts of young men finding a vulnerable woman on the streets at different hours of the day, train stations, other places, and then assaulting in ways that to European eyes seem almost warlike. The cases that are reported in Sweden that sometimes end in the death of a victim. What we saw, I think it was in 2015, 2016, sort of the game of the harrush, which is when a young woman is encircled by a man, and they really do create this prey-predator dynamic. And the young woman is assaulted, her clothes are torn down, and these men form three concentric circles, where the inner circle is the one that is assaulting the victim in all this different groping, trying to put something in every orifice of hers. And then there is a middle circle that is cheering this thing on. And then there is an outer circle that makes sure the outside world doesn't stop it. And things like this happen regularly in Egypt. They happen in Pakistan. They happen in different parts of the Muslim world. These things are now, you're seeing them in Europe. And what we made this trade-off in different countries. Not all countries did it, but countries like Sweden, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Germany, France. The trade-off is we want to protect a minority. We don't want terrorist activities. We don't want what happened, say, for instance, in Denmark in 2016, when an imam went shopping around with real and fake cartoons and mobilized the Muslim outrage. So there's all this tiptoeing around Muslim minorities for various reasons. But for whatever the trade-off is to sacrifice these young, vulnerable women, it is for Europe and Western societies to give up their commitment to the protection of children and women. And it's awful, and it's shameful, and it needs to stop.
As I said, there's been a long argument from generally those on the left who claim, if you look at some of the data, a lot of it comes from white people, particularly paedophiles in the UK, and it's not just one specific group. I thought I'd just say that just for a bit of balance, but I want to ask about Islam itself. What is it about Islam that you think made these people do horrific crimes and essentially rape young white children? Is there something about the religion itself that you think, is there something in the doctrine? Is there something in the Quran? Is there something about the religion that made them do this, or is the religion irrelevant?
The religion is relevant, but the religion doesn't say go rape. I try to explain the complexity of the angle where the religion is relevant in my book in Pray when I was trying to document this problem. These young men come from a different society with a different way of life, and it is an Islamic way of life, doctrinally, but also culturally. And the relationship between men and women in these parts of the world is governed by this honor and shame code. Women stay out of the public eye. When they come into the public eye, they're chaperoned and they're covered from head to toe, because the expectation is that men will behave like animals, either individually or in groups, and attack women. And so when you talk to the imams and you say, it's men should be taught to control their sexual urges, the imam will say, actually, it's women who should stay out of sight. It's women who should cover themselves up. They're the ones who should not put themselves in vulnerable positions. Now, in a country where Sharia law is the way of life, the law of the land, that holds. And these dynamics do happen. Men attack women, and it depends. If you're a woman who comes from a family of very strong men, there is retaliation. It's called an honor retaliation. Sometimes you have feuds that last for generations, that spill the blood of any member of anyone who is perceived to be on the aggressor's tribe or clan or group. What I've just described to you in Western societies is considered primitive. Primitive attitudes to women, primitive attitudes towards conflict resolution. But what we have done is we've allowed large numbers, mainly of men, to relocate to European societies. And then we've adopted this stupid idea that we don't have to assimilate them and that they can live amongst European societies and hold on to their culture and their way of life. And so it is literally a clash of civilizations that is playing out on the streets and on the bodies of women. And every single thing that Europeans said that they held dear, the freedom of speech and the way of life, it's all falling through the cracks. We're all giving it up, all the way down to this. I remember in the 1990s and even in the 1980s, Westerners writing books and saying things about Muslim countries and holding campaigns to end female genital mutilation, to emancipate Muslim women. And here we are now. It is European women, little white girls, who are being raped, and everyone left and right is looking the other way, except individuals like Tommy Robinson, but then he's in prison.
What do you think it says about British society that this issue was, first of all, covered up by the authorities? And you can look at every single layer, whether it's the police or the social administration, even some parents. Everyone let down these children, politicians, the media, and so on. What does it say, as I say, morally about British society that was allowed to happen, and that this issue was first of all covered up, and then second of all ignored, and actively ignored by the establishment in many cases? can you talk a bit about our secular society, a bit about liberalism and modern Britain and morality?
So I have a Canadian friend called Gad Sad, and he describes it as suicidal empathy, which he doesn't say it's exclusively a problem that ails Britain, but apparently it's the entire West that is determined to commit cultural suicide. Yes, we do live in these post-Christian times where, again, to go back to the assimilation issue, assimilating to what? So if we were to deny them and to say, well, you can't practice Sharia law here and you can't keep your way of life here, then when you come to Britain, what does it mean to be British? So normally what that would mean would be to teach them, to draw them into adopting Christian morality.
Right.
But we live in this post-Christian world where morality itself has become quite diffuse. Some people, a lot of people just really take it for granted that you don't rape and that you don't attack women on the streets.
Yeah.
And we have laws that protect us and we will lean on the police. And so it's always someone else's problem. It's also...
You claim any of the benefits shown on...
Wow.
Horrendous and heartbreaking, where people are more concerned with whether or not Elon Musk should be getting involved in British politics than the point he's actually making. If people can be jailed for hurty words or words that incite violence without actually being violent themselves, then people can be jailed for words or actions that result in harm to others. And in my view, both the Conservatives and Labour are guilty. Our two main political parties both washed their hands of a government-led inquiry into grooming gangs, and had it not been for ex-detective Maggie Oliver, who helped expose the failure to tackle paedophile gangs in Rochdale, I doubt much would have happened about it. Maggie blew the lid open on the Rochdale grooming gang scandal, which comprised of mainly Pakistani Muslim males sexually abusing white girls. This is important because, and it's an important fact, because part of the reason why the authorities were not forthcoming about reporting it was because many of those who could have were afraid of being called racists. Now pressure is mounting on the government to deliver a public inquiry into the Oldham scandal. Whistleblower Maggie Oliver said that she had no faith in the Prime Minister's desire to get to the bottom, to get to the truth, after Jess Phillips, the Minister for Safeguarding, although I'm not sure who else she's actually looking out for other than herself, said that it is for Oldham Council alone to decide to commission an inquiry into child sexual exploitation locally, rather than for the government to intervene. While acknowledging the strength of feeling for a further inquiry, the Safeguarding Minister insisted that Oldham should take its own approach, thereby leaving it in the hands of Oldham Council, who themselves have requested a government-led inquiry to get justice for the victims. Leader of Oldham Council said, "Since October, we have been working on setting up that independent inquiry." Went on to say, liaising with Oldham survivors and Telford Council, which conducted a similar inquiry. Well, it makes no sense, which brings me to the conclusion that there is something to hide. Surely you'd want to get to the bottom of it, as it turns out it's somewhat of an epidemic. It's not just Rochdale and Oldham where these types of grooming gangs are rife. It's across the country, from Yeovil to Glasgow. I counted at least 50 locations. How Jess Phillips, a so-called safeguarding minister, can say that with a straight face, as if there's nothing to see here, is beyond me. If she genuinely thinks that, then she's not fit for purpose in her role. This story isn't going to disappear. And it turns out that this man, Sir Keir Starmer, was head of the CPS at the time. Now, I'm not suggesting for a minute that there is any wrongdoing. In fact, many report that Keir was behind getting some form of justice, but his name seems to crop up in so many of these cases. Shadow Safeguarding Minister Alicia Kearns warned that rape camps, which is how she termed it, are hiding in plain sight across Britain.
Oldham Council themselves have put their hands up and said,
We can't do this ourselves if we are to give victims and survivors the justice they want, and if we are to protect girls still in our communities. And if a local authority is saying that, it is for the government to listen and to say, right, we will step in, we will help you. These are rape camps that are hiding in plain sight across our country, and we have to do better by our children.
Yet they were in government and they were the ones in charge at the time. I mean, this didn't happen overnight, and they too rejected an inquiry at the time. Now, Elon Musk, the world's richest man, criticised Sir Keir Starmer over his handling of the scandal during the 5 years that Keir spent as the Director of Public Prosecutions. Elon said the Prime Minister was complicit in the worst mass crime in the history of Britain. Wes Streeting said Elon was misinformed. So what are they all afraid of? Jess? Yes, you, Jess Phillips. This is not going to go away. Nice try. This is a national scandal, and the British public want answers.
That's Ric Flair. Lord, how hard it is to be humble. Woo! It's tough, like it is. Do I make myself clear? I'm not that no more myth. Woo! 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 Woo!
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you. Many things are happening that are exciting.
Can you assure the world that as you try to get control of these areas, you are not going to use military or economic coercion?
No.
What is the strategy?
Yeah, I can't assure you. You're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two. But I can say this. We need them for economic security. It might be that you'll have to do something. Look, the Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. And we gave the Panama Canal to Panama. We didn't give it to China. And they've abused it. They've abused that gift. It should have never been made, by the way. Giving the Panama Canal is why Jimmy Carter lost the election, in my opinion.
Your position is clear, but have you directed your staff to take specific actions to drop plans? And can you elaborate again? You didn't rule out military coercion.
Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before I even ran. I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time.
Are you also considering military force to annex and acquire?
No, economic force. Because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada. Going to be changed. You're sort of the opposite of Biden, where he's closing everything up, essentially getting rid of $50 to $60 trillion worth of assets. We're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, which has a beautiful ring that covers a lot of territory. The Gulf of America, what a beautiful name. Before it started, I can tell you that. The deal could have been made just by an average deal maker. Deal could have been made on that. And Mexico has to stop allowing millions of people to pour into our country. They can stop them. And we're going to put very serious tariffs on Mexico and Canada, because Canada, they come through Canada too. And the drugs that are coming through are at record numbers. Record numbers.
Less than 2 weeks before his inauguration as US President, Donald Trump has repeated his desire to take control of both Greenland and the Panama Canal, and even floated the possibility of using military force. Mr. Trump made his remarks during questions from reporters at his estate in Florida. His son, Donald Trump Jr., was in Greenland today on what he called a personal day trip to talk to people. Here's our North America editor, Sarah Smith.
This is a very deliberate signal of intent, of Donald Trump's genuine desire to take over Greenland. It's no coincidence that his son, Don Jr., landed there today.
Here as tourists, see
It may look like he's come for a property viewing, Trump style, before trying to buy the island. He says that's not the case.
Do you have a message from your father?
It says hello.
Okay, to whom?
We were talking to him yesterday, so he says hello to everyone in Greenland.
Okay, are you still interested in buying Greenland or?
Greenland is controlled by Denmark, whose prime minister says it is very much not for sale. Its strategic location, sitting between the US and Russia, is why Donald Trump wants to take control.
People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right to it. But if they do, they should give it up because we need it for national security. That's for the free world. I'm talking about protecting the free world.
In a very wide-ranging, freewheeling press conference, he listed all the countries that are in his sights.
Then we want to get along with everybody, but you know, they have to, it takes two to tango.
Revealing more of his global ambitions, he said he also wants control of the crucial shipping route, the Panama Canal. It is essential, he says, for America's economic security.
The Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. And we gave the Panama Canal to Panama. We didn't give it to China. And they've abused it. They've abused that gift.
He repeated his threat to put crippling tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico if they don't tighten border security. And he announced a unilateral plan to completely rename the Gulf of Mexico.
We're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, which has a beautiful ring that covers a lot of territory. The Gulf of America, what a beautiful name.
Joined by his special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump says there has already been a lot of progress on efforts to release about 100 hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. He wants them freed before his inauguration in less than 2 weeks' time.
If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
In under a fortnight, history will repeat itself when Donald Trump is once again sworn in as the US president. This time around, he wants to use the power of his office to reshape the world in a way that puts America's, and only America's, interests first.
We have got so much to talk about tonight. McDonald's takes diversity off the menu. Facebook tries to friend MAGA, and someone bought Donald Trump a globe. So let's get into it with our continuing coverage of Trump 2.0 coming for the White House.
I'm going to come.
When Donald Trump won in November, it was largely on the promise of improving the everyday lives of American people, from fixing inflation after it was already fixed to fighting the nationwide crime wave that he made up. And today, in a press conference from Mar-a-Lago, Trump announced one of those common sense kitchen table policies that Americans have been waiting for.
We're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
We have been so concerned about all the scary things that Trump's going to do. We forgot he's also going to do some really stupid things. I guess Gulf of America does have a ring to it, as in there was another horrific oil spill in the Gulf of America.
Oh, I've got a new business model that nobody knows. And no, guys, stop.
Let's start with you, Patrick, and the response by Mexico's president, very specifically to the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America. That is very specifically what Donald Trump said he would do.
Yes, and of course, the legality of that, the American president just can't rewrite names on maps necessarily. But Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum was asked about it in her daily briefing today, and while it is certainly insulting to many Mexicans that this body of water that their entire lives, throughout modern history has been called the Gulf of Mexico, would somehow be magically renamed the Gulf of America. She had some fun with it at the press conference, and actually sort of poked fun at Donald Trump and actually came back with her own suggestion for what this body of water could be renamed as.
Obviously, the name Gulf of Mexico is recognized by the United Nations, by a United Nations agency. Why don't we call it Mexican America? It sounds nice, right? Since 1607, the Constitution of Apatzingan referred to it as Mexican America. We're going to call it Mexican America. It sounds beautiful, right? And the Gulf of Mexico has been recognized internationally since 1607 as well. Yesterday, President Trump was misinformed. He was told that Felipe Calderón and García Luna still govern in Mexico. But no, in Mexico, the people govern.
What about the November presidential election had anything to do with invading Greenland or seizing it by force? I'm confused by the obsession around these comments. What does it have to do with making sure that hardworking American taxpayers can live the American dream?
I think one of the basic propositions we brought to our work over the last 4 years is that we're stronger, we're more effective, we get better results when we're working closely with our allies, not saying or doing things that may alienate them. Having said that, it's the idea expressed about Greenland is obviously not a good one, but maybe more important, it's obviously one that's not going to happen. So we probably shouldn't waste a lot of time talking about it.
I think in many ways, it's not a question of whether should we be American or Danish citizens. It's a question of whether should we maybe collaborate a bit more with the US. We shouldn't be bought by anyone because Greenland is not for sale and Greenland will not be for sale, but we can have a closer collaboration on business development with the US. And also the dad to Trump Jr. is of course saying that he would like to own and control Greenland. And we don't like that. We find it quite disrespectful in Greenland.
Jeg synes, det er vigtigt at holde fast i, at det på den ene side er godt, at der er en stigende amerikansk interesse for, hvad der foregår, også i Nordland, også i det arktiske område, fordi nogle af de spændinger, vi ser i andre dele af verden, ja, de begynder også at komme til det arktiske område. Så jeg som en meget, meget tæt allieret med USA, synes jeg, der er grund til at glæde sig over den stigende amerikanske interesse. Men det bliver nødt til at foregå på en måde, der er respektfuld over for det grønlandske folk, og vi bliver nødt til at kunne samarbejde på den måde, vi plejer at gøre det, blandt andet i NATO-sammenhæng og i andre internationale forer.
Grønland er ikke til salg. Det har vi jo sagt alle sammen, og det kommer aldrig til salg. Og det kan jeg også konkludere. Altså, det kommer aldrig på tale. Det er vores land, og det er også der kommer til at tegne vores fremtid. Og så den der køb om Grønland, eller kontrol over Grønland, det kommer ikke til at ske.
Trump, man. Man's gonna invade the whole globe. I mean, how is he going to afford all this? I think one thing America needs to remember is if they try to fight alone, that could really turn the tables. That could turn the tables. Okay, you could see some very unlikely partnerships. If that happens. So Trump is it's a suggestion. I mean, I don't know how that's gonna work. I don't know what's the I know strategically I understand that Greenland, but also Russia would probably have a problem with that. The UK would have a problem with that, where Greenland is just above the UK. But it is. Well, so he wants to have Canada as well, right? Well, interesting. Greenland, where Greenland is. Let's have a look and see where Greenland is. Greenland. Greenland. Alright, Greenland. So if I go like this, so speaking about Greenland, so well, it seems to touch, is it Newfoundland, up by Canada, right? Canada. So it's a huge plot of land there. Huge plot of land. I mean, I don't know what the population is like up there. Oh, it's an autonomous kingdom of Denmark. How did Denmark get that then? Look how far Denmark is. And Denmark ain't going to be able to say nothing about that. And so, I mean, if he's got like Germany, France, and the European nations against him, that's not really wise. I mean, as I said, if America really, that's their only allies. America needs allies as much as people need America, because America is very important, right? As a friend and not an enemy. So what is it about this place here? What is it about? So he's not ruling out military force. And he's not ruling out America's military presence. So it's been dwarfed recently with a handful of ships, dog sled patrols, and single surveillance planes operated by the Arctic Islands Security Guarantor. So that's Denmark. So Denmark are in charge. I don't know how Denmark, from so far, but anyway, they just have like the guardianship, we may say, and then we've got. So you've got a northernmost, what does that say there? I'm not sure. Northernmost, where was I? Okay, so the northernmost US base is only about 1,500 kilometers from the North Pole. It's the most potent symbol of how vital Greenland is to American security. Geostrategic importance is only likely to increase as climate changes reshapes the Arctic, opening new trade routes. Right, so there might be new trade routes can open up, and putting Greenland at the heart of the growing polar tussle between the US, China, and Russia. For the US, the problem is Chinese and Russian interest in the Arctic, right? So there's some interest in the Arctic. And he's also spoke about the buying of Greenland in 2019 as a large real estate deal, right? And he's saying that it's needed for national security purposes. So here we have Greenland, which is also mineral rich and has oil deposits. So that is definitely something to want to secure. You'd want to secure that. You'd like to secure that, wouldn't you? So you got they've already got a base up there. Okay, right. They've already got a base Let me get this up bigger. Aha. Right. Okay. Special exploration licenses needed as well. Active oil license blocks. So we can see Canada on your left. Right. Right. So it's got energy, commodities, industrial rocks and minerals. So rare metals, precious precious gemstones as well. How about that? How about that? So the world's largest non-continental island may have only 57,000 inhabitants, but it has an outsized role in security matters. It sits at the start of both the northwest and northeast passages through the Arctic, which are likely to open up more to commercial shipping through melting that we spoke about before. So, yep, so there's could be a trade route opening up. Okay. And we have security reasons as well, visible since World War II. Right, so it's been floated before, this idea of buying Greenland. And there is repeated efforts by the Chinese to extend their influence. They want to become an Arctic power. So there's a fight now for the Arctic. There's a fight for the Arctic. Right. There's a fight for the Arctic there. Very interesting. So you got the space base, the Pitufik space base in Greenland, and that's part of the US missile early warning system. So if anything from Russia's coming over, okay, or wherever, Denmark invested up to 2 billion on new ships, drones, sled teams. Right, I spoke about before. There's your pictures. Right. And, you know, it's not for sale, people are saying. It's not for sale. It's not for sale. And Donald Trump Jr., he landed with the Trump plane, ready to get the wallet out and start spending. So yeah, there you go. That's well, it is what it is. And then, you know, the grooming gangs, to wrap up, the grooming gangs, my thoughts on it all is I believe that there should be an inquiry, and also a more unity, proactive attempt to save young, vulnerable people, no matter what race. Okay, the young people. And as I spoke about race, it doesn't matter what race, religion, you know, whatever you're doing. If it's against the law, it's against the law. So you have to deal with that. I think people need to really take responsibility for their actions and also for their community's actions. Okay, right? One bad apple spoils the bunch. We have Elon Musk jumping in as well. We've got Keir Starmer, who was the prosecutor at the time, so he's prosecuted quite a few people. And it's a Labour government as well. Jess Phillips' remarks is a little bit odd for myself. I think she could really maybe apologise, but also most importantly is to stop this political games. You know, people's lives are at risk, and it's just awful. to know that grown men are preying on young girls, right? Okay. And also you've got yes, I would say a lot of jumping on the bandwagon. I think Keir Starmer was right there about jumping on the bandwagon. And it's just a shame that, politics, and we don't have proper laws and proper punishment. A lot of scapegoatism. Okay. Right. Lots of scapegoatism, and at the end of the day, it's the people suffering. At the end of the day, what can the communities do as a whole to protect young people? And we heard the report from a lady about Islam and how the different cultures are, which we understand is more like a male orientated, just like how the Christian is male orientated. It has been watered down, okay, but there is no disillusion about women's rights. Has not always been a level playing field, you see, right? They've suffered a lot under, say, male leadership, or not being included in that. And I think importance is a balance to things. The balance is very important. Can't be one-sided. So the bill was voted down. So if you just joined the live, or if you're listening, or that was at the start of the live, and then a little small portion of Trump, and he's going to buy Greenland, okay, and anybody else where he can buy, right? So yes, that is it, folks. Okay, JTV, agree or disagree? This is the place for you.